Distinguished guests, dear participants, good morning and welcome on the second day of Western Balkan Digital Summit Skopje 2008. What an exciting day we had yesterday. I think that everyone had more chance to get more knowledge, more experience and more information from the panel discussions that we had. I think that today we will have fruitful working day, and we will start with the first panel named Digital Environment Networks and Services, Connectivity and Access, the right framework condition for digital connectivity in Western Balkans. The moderator of the first panel will be Milena Harito. I'm inviting her on a stage, and I'll leave you on her guests on this panel. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I hope you are all well awake from the long day we had yesterday. Very good day, I think. And things are going very fast now on the digital in the Western Balkans. Since the last summer in Trieste, where at the highest level, the 6 prime ministers agreed to cooperate on the digital in the framework of the regional economic area with the heavy support of RCC, of the Regional Cooperation Council, things are accelerating. We had in February this year the strategy of enlargement of the European Commission that for the first time ever put in the 6 flagship initiatives the digital agenda for the Western Balkans, which is a big step. And now here we are in the first digital summit. Today talking about connectivity, let's say, which is a huge issue, and we'll discover with the honored panelists why. So I am very honored to invite you, Irini Relin, an honored professor and assistant minister of telecommunications and information technology for Serbia. Dorina Tsinari, the deputy minister of infrastructure in Albania. So go, Irini, here, please. Dorina, here. Then Miguel Morgado, head of Adriatic Sea Department at the European Investment Bank. Please, Miguel. Johannes Gungel, chairman of BEREC. Hello, Mr. Gungel. Just there. Then the European Commission is David Ringrose, the head of international outreach of DG Connect, that is here with us. Mr. Anthony Whelan, which has just lost his flight, so, well. And then we have Natalia Gelvanovska-Garcia, regulatory specialist at the World Bank. Headquarters, you are a well-known specialist of the regulatory affairs from several years. Then Mr. Popovsky, I would say a serial entrepreneur in the Balkans, and among others also the president of the Southeast European Broadband Council. And Nives Sandri, representing the industry, representing Nokia, board member of Nokia and Deutsche Telekom customer business team for the Southeastern Europe. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here and for participating at this panel on connectivity. Now, I will just give the floor to you, and I will begin perhaps with the European Commission. The Western Balkans countries are engaged in the accession to the European Union, which is, we know, a very long process, even if we are accelerating, because from yesterday, Albania has the positive recommendation of opening negotiations, and Macedonia had also a good positive report. So but we know that this is a long and complex process. But on the other side, we can move, nothing can prevent us from moving faster for the digital single market. We don't need to be full members of the European Union to advance for the digital single market, to boost innovation, growth, and jobs. So what are the steps we countries of the Western Balkans 6 should do, and how the European Commission can support us on that?
Hello, is this okay? Is it working? Hello? Okay, that's good, thank you. Firstly, apologies for those of you who saw my colleague Anthony Whelan's face on the program. He couldn't be here today, but I'm very happy to step in for him. I think what we saw yesterday in the discussion, opening discussion, was how much is now happening in order to use the internet to solve the problems of today. We heard a lot about services for citizens, bringing government online, ensuring that the internet can improve transparency, working on the regulatory climate and so on. And I think this is all great. And it's obviously moving very fast, as you said. I think what we're thinking about also is what we need for the internet for tomorrow, when we need much more data-heavy services, when we need the infrastructure that can support that, for e-government, for e-health, for Industry 4.0 and so on. And there I think the challenge is a different one, and it's more about investment in connectivity. Yeah? What we're trying to do in the EU, we've had what we call our Gigabit Society proposal, and there we're looking at trying to ensure that we can have the networks in place for the Gigabit Society by 2025, offering download speeds of up to 100 megabits per second and upgradable to 1 gigabit. Starting with what we're calling the main drivers, such as public institutions and so on. And I think it's clear that at the moment the penetration rates in the region here are too low for that, and we need to increase that. And what can we do, I think, is the question, and this is one of the things that we'll be trying to talk about in the flagship, the Digital Agenda flagship that was announced in the Commission strategy in February. I think firstly what the governments of the region need to do, I know there's a lot of work being going on, but we need to have very good mapping of the broadband needs in the region. Some countries have done a bit more in this area, but I think at the moment one of the problems is that there will never be money until there is projects, and people don't put forward projects unless they think there's any money. So we have to get out of that cycle, and for that we need a good mapping of all of the broadband needs in the region. And as a result of that, then national broadband plans, I think, are very important, so we can see what is required in each of the countries in the region. One of the important things, of course, that we have put in place in the EU is the Broadband Cost Reduction Directive, because obviously you need to make sure that you can, when you're investing your money in broadband, you can get the best value, and I think the broadband cost reduction measures will be very important to ensure that this can go ahead rapidly and at a reasonable cost. And of course, there's all kinds of things to be done in terms of the models of financing, not just public models, but also public-private financing and so on. I was very pleased in December last year in the meeting of the Western Balkans Investment Forum that the WBIF agreed to make digital one of the priority sectors, which is very good. So that's unlocked some funding for studies, for technical assistance and things like that. And we'll be discussing again here in Skopje next week about the kinds of things that we can do, because I think the important thing then is to see how we can work with all of the various funding sources that we have, whether it's grant funding in the EU, whether it's blended finance and so on, to ensure that we can get the kinds of results that we have in the EU under structural funds, for example. So I think there's a lot that can be done, but I must say I'm very encouraged, and I think the Commissioner yesterday was also very encouraged to see the political will to move fast on this, because as you said, we need to move fast. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ringrose. Of course, the European Commission is completely involved in all our accession process, and we need your support at every step. So the collaboration with you is crucial for all the countries. But also, all our countries, the Western Balkans 6, are part of BEREC. So we have the pleasure to have here the chairman of BEREC for 2018, Mr. Gungel. And can you explain the role that BEREC is playing to drive connectivity in Europe? And what BEREC can do to support the digital transition in the Western Balkans 6?
Good morning, everybody. Let me start by explaining first, because this might not be too transparent to everybody, what BEREC is. BEREC is the Board of European Regulators for Electronic Communication, and we consist of 28 member states plus observer countries from the EEA, plus accession countries, of which 4 are currently part of BEREC. Unfortunately, 2 are not. Bosnia and Kosovo are currently not BEREC members and participating in BEREC. But you have to know that telecom law in Europe is European law, and it is applied by national regulatory authorities. And in order to secure and ensure a consistent application of telecom law, BEREC is here to push harmonization. And we convene several times a year. We have a midterm strategy. We have a yearly work program where we focus on certain topics. We have strategic priorities, of which 5G this year is one of the most important. We are very much working on connectivity, and this year in 2018 our colleague from Serbia, Mr. Vladica Tintor, is part of the so-called mini board that is kind of a steering group out of the 28 or 37 as we are, that pushes the work program. So as you can see, most of the countries of the Western Balkans are already involved. They are part of the Board of Regulators. They are part and they are participating in the expert working group. So everything we do is transparent and open for them as well. And this means that national regulatory authorities in this region have the full knowledge and the full know-how of implementing the telecom framework, and they know very well about what's going on in Europe. So from a know-how and from a knowledge point of view, everything is here. And so national regulators can play a very important role in supporting connectivity. And how do we support connectivity and the rollout of high-speed networks? First of all, we try to drive competition because we are convinced that fair competition drives investment. One of our core topics is access to incumbents networks, and therefore an access regime that really drives investment and enables alternative operators to drive competition is key for the development of connectivity. So this is in our core remit, so to say, and in 2018 we have chosen to pick 5G as a main topic. We will look into award procedures, what are best practices in spectrum auctions. We will look into infrastructure sharing and find best practices there, because when it comes to 5G, the rollout is quite expensive, and therefore infrastructure sharing to reduce cost of rollout is of great importance. We will also look into coverage. For instance, this year we will develop measurement tools that will enable customers to test their internet connection, because in the fixed line as well as in the mobile networks, the bandwidth that are marketed or that are put forward in advertisings are not the speeds that are really there. So we want to empower consumers to know what they get if they sign a contract. And we will develop this tool as a reference tool, and every single country and every single NRA can take this tool and implement this nationally. And I think this will bring more transparency to the market, and it will bring more consumer empowerment to the market, and this will drive again competition, which is crucial to drive connectivity. And this is our central goal, to drive connectivity in high-speed networks.
Thank you, and it brings us to a very important topic, that is accessibility for everyone. And everyone here, everyone who is traveling in the region, is well aware of the question of speed and accessibility, how much you have access to the networks. And this is becoming every day more important, because we use more, we need more speed, we are looking videos on our iPads all the time. So the quantity of data we can manage in our networks and the accessibility is very important. So I would like to come to the two representatives of the governments that are here, from Serbia and from Albania, and to discuss a little bit the question of broadband and the level of the broadband access our citizens in the Balkans have. And because it is a precondition, you cannot develop digital skills, you can develop e-services and e-government, but if the citizens don't have enough access, they will not use it. So it is a precondition, and on the other side, it costs a lot of money. We know that Serbia has a broadband plan development for the whole Republic of Serbia, and we would like to know a little bit more on how you manage or how you have foreseen to deploy it. Thank you.
Thank you. Serbia has a broadband plan as a part of our broadband strategy, in fact, as a part of action plan for the strategy. We have developed a strategy that will be developed this week, I suppose, or next, but it will be developed. And this is the plan for next generation networks, meaning that different types of networks will be connected in order to enable the digital single market. Our primary goal was to have the digital single market, and then we were thinking about the easiest way how to manage that, and we found that it would be introducing the blocks that were supported by digital single market, such as 5G, IoT, cloud computing, and something that comes from information society, of course. The thing that is common for all the technologies is broadband. So whatever we are planning to do, you are right, we have to do it in order to, in fact, we could do it only if we have the broadband infrastructure. Even if we introduce the 5G or 4G, we need a lot of fibers for primary distribution of our signals, and we need really, we say, the optical coupler network in order to have everything of that. We have developed the strategy, and in the broadband plan, we will split our country into 5. We will say that we have different areas. We have 5,000 and even more areas, and most of them are very, very bad inhabited. So we have to develop something for rural areas. In fact, we split the country into the urban areas. We have 2 types in urban areas, which are with high density and middle density. Then we have rural areas with even somewhere high density in some villages that are in the plain and so, but we will subsidize and do something for the 4th part of the country with very low densities in some villages. Unfortunately, we also have the areas with very small number of households. So we will resolve that by our universal service, and I think that our regulator is going to prepare the bylaw, the new bylaw for universal service. So these are our plans. We have few strategies, and most of them have been done with Korean Institute. One of them was for mobile broadband, and we have really rather good results, we would say, for 4G at the moment, and we are planning also 5G on the highways, etc. First on the highways. We believe that next year we will have auction for 3.4, 3.8 gigas bandwidth, and we will have everything in the mobile. We have complete mapping for mobile broadband, but we don't have a complete mapping for fixed broadband, which is a bad situation. We believe that we will start finishing it at the end of this year, and probably next year we will have complete mapping for it. The plans will contain the plans for money and for our subsidizing or taking some new I would say, new solutions for that, and we will do it according to the new strategy that is going to, the new study that is going to be finished this year, and this was financed by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, so we will have that plan very soon.
Thank you, Irini. Now, to come to Albania, Mrs. Tsinari Dorina, in Albania, you have, for the first time, I think, applied for a project, for a digital project, so a study on the broadband, the mapping as in Serbia they are doing, through an instrument which is the WBEF, which for the first time has been accepting digital, let's say, projects on the digital, which is a good thing, which is another sign that things are going fast on the digital. But can you say a little bit more to all the public on this project and your projects toward the development of the broadband in Albania?
Thank you, Milena. Good morning to everybody. As you well said in the beginning, we cannot start discussion on digital transformation or digital ambitions without thinking first on digital infrastructure. Now, where is Albania on this? So we have an open telecommunication market since 2008. We have widely LTE mobile broadband. We have, to a certain degree, fixed broadband provision by a number of ISPs. The data for the internet users and fixed broadband subscribers has increased considerably year after year with a ratio of 10 to 15% each year, which is ambitious. On the other side, the penetration of the fixed broadband is still very low, and this compared to to the region and to the EU. I will give some general data to understand the situation in Albania. So we have a huge gap between fixed penetration in urban and rural areas. The fixed penetration is low, approximately 38% in the households. The mobile penetration is higher than fixed. The coverage of population with LTE is over 85%. Now, on the demand side, we have, out of a population 2.8 million inhabitants, we have more than 2 million broadband users by the end of 2017, which is 20% higher than the last year, 50% higher the 2 years before. Also, similar to global trends, the data traffic is growing very fast in fixed and in mobile networks. The internet data traffic was doubled year by year, and the mobile traffic has increased even more. Next, the government of Albania has launched a very ambitious reform, the e-government reform. For this reform to be able to reach to each and every citizen, we have to have infrastructure. The reform cannot be in Tirana only. So it's the time, the demand, and the readiness to accept, new infrastructure, and the need for investment is there now to be able to catch the train. Now, what's the government of Albania doing to promote the development of the broadband? Of course, the most prominent roles of the government are policy making, regulation, and as owners and dispensers of the spectrum for mobile networks. Now, we recognize the role of ICTs as of paramount importance in the development of our countries, economically and socially. We have identified the broadband development and the digital connectivity as key priority areas in our strategic documents, such as the National Development Plan for an Integration Plan, the National Agenda, Digital Agenda, the National Broadband Plan, ERP 2020. So we recognize and we identify these needs. Then we have started with some projects. With the support of UNDP, Albania has partnered in a pre-feasibility study to do a scanning of the broadband situation in Albania. The study piloted 13 municipalities in 4 cross-border regions. It has been completed in September 2017, and it has, provided with a proposed list of actions on how to tackle the need. Based on these findings, we have applied for a full-fledged feasibility study under the WBIF 19 financial instrument. It's now our call to ask for support into approving this study. What we plan and what is the scope of the project is to be able to match all the objectives of our national broadband plan and ensure connectivity with at least 30 megabit per second in each school, hospital, and local government unit everywhere in Albania. We are also looking forward to the results of the regional study performed by the World Bank, Digital Balkans Highway, which is looking into the synergies between energy infrastructures and telecom infrastructures. So the study will seek to see what is the inventory of infrastructures available for sharing, and of course an action plan on how to enable, to make this operational, start sharing infrastructure. Else we are doing interventions and improvements in our legal framework. Now I will start reading because it's Albania has approved the law on development of high-speed electronic communication networks and the provision of the right way that fully approximate with the EU Directive 2014/61 on measures to reduce construction costs of electronic communication networks with high speed. Now, this new law is the beginning of a new reform in the development of broadband infrastructure because it increases investment, improves broadband penetration, increases efficiency in existing infrastructure through infrastructure sharing, and as well as increase competition. In the meanwhile, we have started the preparation of the implementation package of secondary legislation, which will enable the execution of this law. We have started actually a consultation process with all the stakeholders, and we are planning to work with operators, regulators, everybody to make this as doable as possible. Furthermore, to promote broadband development, we have taken concrete steps during 2017 through different legal acts to free the spectrum of 800 megahertz for use from the LTE networks. The spectrum is now ready, and it's there ready for licensing. What is an opportunity in our case is that the new Ministry of Infrastructure and Energy is the Ministry of Infrastructures. So it's the opportunity now to take advantage of the fact that we can create synergies, using energy, road infrastructure, telecoms all together. So this is what we are doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorina. You gave all the spectrum of the issues that everyone has to tackle when in government, going from legal enforcement of the legal framework, then the real projects, and then the issues of spectrum and liberating the spectrum and giving the licenses and then going until to the home of the citizen to give them access. But of course, one of the main issues for the development of the broadband, especially for the fixed broadband, where, if I remember the study that was presented yesterday, is quite an issue in Albania especially. The question of the financing is crucial, because the infrastructure, this is infrastructure, and infrastructure is very expensive. So now we are going to the European Bank of Investment. Mr. Morgado, thank you for being here, and you can perhaps give us your insight on how the European Investment Bank can contribute to the development of the broadband for our countries and the benefits we can have from that.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for inviting the EIB to participate in this very important event. I am very pleased of representing the EIB. The EIB has a very extensive and well-proven track record both in the region and in the digital sector. Let me start with the first point. We have financed projects that help the social and development growth of the region since the late 70s. From 2001 until now, we have provided more than 10 billion euros of financing to the region. We have supported particularly connectivity projects, but also SMEs as well as human capital. We have very strong relationships with the key stakeholders in the region, including governments, commercial banks, other IFIs, and private and public sector promoters. So we have indeed a well-proven track record. We know well the region, and we believe that we can extend all these skills to support the digital agenda, which we very much welcome from the European Commission, and as was also very much stressed in Trieste and the following meetings of the WBIF. We are a policy-driven bank, so we are a financial tool actually to help achieving the objectives of the European Union. Now, in the sector, one of our key priorities is contributing to innovation and knowledge economy. We have provided over the last 5 years something like 72 billion euros across the world to fulfill this objective. And within this objective, the information and communication technology is absolutely fundamental. We have provided 15 billion across the world of financing to this sector, basically around 4 key areas. First of all, providing long-term, very competitive loans to broadband infrastructure. Secondly, to support manufacturers of ICT equipment, particularly under the research, development and innovation angle. We have also supported projects of software development and security. And last but not the least, also digitalization. The digitalization of retailing, banking, schools, and so on. So, again, we have very good experience and knowledge in both areas, the sector and the region. What we provide are loans, which means that the projects and the promoters should be bankable. This means basically that there should be a source, a very well verified source of repayment of our facilities. Now, some, if not most of the projects, and particularly those in rural areas, they are not, of course, susceptible of generating commercial revenues. So there is the need of blending loans with grants. And this blending can be achieved precisely within the context of WBIF. WBIF is a very powerful tool for that purpose. So it puts together the European Commission, which has contributed so far 1.5 billion euros of grants into this framework. It also includes IFIs like EBRD, EIB, NPVs as well, KfW, the Council of Europe Bank, and donor countries. So this is a very powerful platform to actually put together loans and grants in order to enhance the financeability of the relevant projects. When I talk of grants, it's not only investment grants. We are talking also of grants for technical assistance, because we are very eager of also contributing to support the capacity of promoters to design, tender, and implement the projects at the level of the central government as well as local authorities, whoever might be the promoters of the relevant projects. So I think that we can really provide value, not only alone through our financing, long-term financing at very competitive conditions, but also together with other partners, like other IFIs and like the Commission.
Thank you, but as we are here, I would like to go a little bit deeper on that point. A lot of European countries, even the most developed countries like Germany or France or England, which is a European country, even if it will not be anymore in the European Union, they have these broadband development plans because all these projects are not bankable. So, I mean, they need also public money, or when I mean public money, it could be regional, European, from the country, from everywhere, but in any case, public money to be developed. But money is not all, of course. In order to use this money, you need some instruments to create public-private partnerships of different sorts, different kinds, and this is very technical also. So this is something perhaps where you can also help?
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned PPPs. We have used actually this financing scheme to support broadband, for example, in France, where there is the financing provided based on availability payments to be made by the public sector to the providers of the infrastructure. So we are perfectly able, and we have also a very extensive experience in these financing schemes precisely to use PPPs for this sector as well. Now, PPPs, it's fine, but they require a very tested and effective framework, legal framework. You need to give security to the different counterparts involved. You need to be able to provide contracts which protect all the parties involved and which provide for a fair sharing of risks and benefits. In other terms, the PPPs cannot be a free lunch for the private sector. They shall be structured in a manner that actually there is a fair distribution and allocation of risks and benefits. It is, again, clear that on a standalone basis and taking into account the revenues from users, most of the projects do not fly. I fully agree with you, and it is the reason why PPPs based on a very strong public sector contribution are very important. But also grants. And there is also another fundamental point, is that the public sector themselves, they need to inject public money. This means that they are constrained by fiscal space, and therefore there are hard choices to be made by governments in terms of allocation of the scarce resource, which is fiscal space. So at a certain point in time, governments should decide whether to allocate money to a motorway, to a railway, or to digital infrastructure. So, this is actually a very hard and important policy decision. So priorities should be actually made very, very clear and should be consensual, and the corresponding financing will, of course, follow. But just to illustrate another financial structure which we can use, we are about to launch the Broadband Investment Fund, which is a layered fund. This means what? This means that the EIB and other counterparts contribute with the junior tranches of a fund which will count on lenders at a more senior level in order to gather all the resources necessary to take the right risks with the right projects. And this is something that we can apply not only for medium and large projects, but rather and particularly for the smaller projects. So this is something that we expect also to deploy in the region. Let me also mention another point, which is the Economic Resilience Initiative. This is something which was launched in 2016 upon a request of the European Council of Ministers, and it is a financial scheme to actually tackle the root causes of migration. So it consists of a whole series of building blocks, which basically for the EIB, and to simplify and to sum up what might be a very long discussion, it reinforces volume that the EIB can provide under the external lending mandate which we signed with the European Commission. It also enhances our risk-bearing capacity, which means that we can accept higher risks, therefore put on the table money for projects that are not so easily bankable. It reinforces our capacity to provide technical assistance on top of what is already done within the context of the WBIF. And also it gives us more resources to support the private sector and particularly SMEs. So the Economic Resilience Initiative gives the EIB around double of the power, the firepower to lend in the region, which has been on average per annum between 400 and 500 million, and we expect to grow to roughly the double in the coming years. So this all to say that I strongly believe that we are extremely well positioned with the different instruments and with our financial skills and capacity, and also the technical skills that we have, because there is, and I finish here, I don't want to occupy too long time, it is also the important, another effect, which is the so-called stamp of approval effect, as we say. Because the EIB performs a very thorough and extensive due diligence of the projects to validate their technical, economic, financial, environmental viability. So this means that when EIB says, let's go, we lend, this is a very strong sign to the market, and other lenders, other potential financiers feel comfortable actually to join the same transaction. This is also something which I think makes an integral part of the value that we can give to the transactions.
Thank you very much. Quite some issues in your talk. Of course, the complexity of the system, I think, is quite an issue for the readiness our countries have to use these instruments. And this is something that we should try to tackle together, because there is a certain level of readiness from the governments, but also from the private sector, and to use these complex instruments, some support will be needed to push the sector. So quite an issue. And then, of course, your point on the fact that when EIB says go for a project, it's a very strong sign. This makes a very good transition with the World Bank and the representative of the World Bank, because it's the same thing for the World Bank in the region, which is very engaged in a lot of projects, infrastructure projects, different kinds of projects. But in this case, the World Bank has invested by itself, I would say, for a study on the digital highways of the region. So it would be very interesting to hear a little bit more about that from you, Natalia, please.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for bringing us in. We were indeed working with many of the countries here on different subjects: cybersecurity, digital jobs, infrastructure, most notably, of course. And as you have mentioned, we do pretty much what EIB does, but globally. So it's a pleasure to be here and to have a panel dedicated to infrastructure. We had a lot of interesting topics covered yesterday, but what is important to remember, for everything digital to function, you need actually a digital infrastructure, which is advanced, which is future-proof, which is quick, and which is of high quality. So I think that's like a very, very basics for everything what's coming. So those discussions are very important, I believe. Before we will go to that more specific initiative, I just wanted to make sure that we cover one important topic that we somehow didn't cover in this panel, and I think it's important moving forward for the governments to keep that in mind. And that thing is that the telecom sector, it's a rare sector of infrastructure which is a private sector in principle. We have private companies operating and investing here, and what we should keep remembering is that wherever we will do there as the governments, we have to do in agreement with the private sector. So it's not that we will now think that now it's time for public sector to come. It's important for public sector to come, but only in complementarity and bringing additional value to private sector. So the trust and the binding between those two will be the absolutely necessity for the success of every rural broadband project in the country, big or small. Unless this consensus is found with the private sector, the public sector alone, I'm afraid, may not be entirely successful as it could be, and we should always remember that. So wherever Albania or the other country is moving forward, first they need to sit down with their players and to really discuss what are the problems we have, why those areas are wide, you know. Maybe we can do something before we will put public money on the table. Maybe this is not even needed. And then we move forward from there. Solutions may be very different. There may be reforms needed, there may be financing needed, there may be new operators needed. So I think that component should be somewhere on the back of the mind of every minister that is covering ICT sector in the country. So that's absolutely essential to have a backing of the private sector whenever we talk about the infrastructure. Now, coming back into the Western Balkans, our own analysis has shown that the things that countries are facing here, and I think pretty much homogeneously, is that the retail prices for the high-speed connections, like 10 megas, 30 megas, 100 megas, are very expensive. But when you go down to the lower prices, the level of prices is quite affordable. So the region cannot leap into those higher connectivity in principle because of those retail prices, but of course the infrastructure is somehow lacking. So we are talking about the rural broadband, this last segment, but it is our understanding that perhaps we should look a little bit upper into the wholesale level, and we have observed quite a monopolistic market structures over there and some competition constraints over there, which I think would be pretty efficiently be broken, and more competition could be brought there just by increasing the supply. And after all this, what does it mean? It's just bringing more connectivity into the backbones, into the interconnection of the countries. And from where this connectivity could be brought is from the already installed infrastructure. Apparently here in Balkans, utility companies are pretty advanced, and there is a lot of fiber hanging, for instance, over the electricity transmission grids, and this is one of the findings of that study that Milena has mentioned, where we were trying to assess what is the potential of this alternative fiber infrastructure in the region, and we were surprised to find that it's pretty impressive and it's extremely underused. So nothing is commercially available almost anywhere. There are just two countries who were successful in bringing this infrastructure in the market, Kosovo and Montenegro. Elsewhere, it's still being locked. However, unlocking this may bring the wholesale prices down and can allow some investments into those rural areas. And that's actually infrastructure sharing. This was mentioned by the European Commission, by BEREC, and this is one of the measures of the that famous directive of the reduction of the broadband deployment costs. And this is very unique directive. When I was back in time in Lithuanian regulatory authority, we were just working to put this directive together with all the other countries. And why it is unique is because it's bringing together the measures which actually worked somewhere among European Union, in some countries. Somewhere infrastructure sharing worked, somewhere co-financing worked, somewhere coordination of civil works worked. So that's something is very practical, very pragmatic thing to increase interconnectivity in the country. So I think that starting from that reform, talking to the private sector, thinking how we can do things nationally with what we have in our hands, I think that's the first way to go. And then after that is being done and the conclusions are being made that there is still a need for some public co-financing, this is what should be a next step. Most importantly, it should be remembered that in case of telecoms, the expertise and the knowledge is not on the public side, it's on the private side. Those guys are investing, they are building, they know very, very well what the situation is. Building trust and confidence between both will allow to find real solutions for the problems that we are having. And the financial institutions are, of course, always there with all our knowledge and expertise to support what is remaining. So I believe that that's some important takeaways that we can, carry with us as we go forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Natalia. Now, I would like to go a little bit more to the industry, and please, Nives, can you are, before Mr. Popovsky, I would like to have the view of Nokia, which is engaged with all the operators and networks of the region, I guess. And I would put it, I would say, what is the ideal or the prospective local loop in the countries that Nokia imagine? What are your plans on the local loop in the region?
Okay. I was listening very carefully what other panelists said, and lots of already said, but let me give you information that Nokia is present in all countries in a region, Western Balkans as well, and in Macedonia as well too. Before I'm coming to the let's say some notes what we collected, me personally being in all these countries collected from the countries, would like to underline how important is this digitalization for everybody, us as a citizen and end users. I mean, many years ago we were talking about writing and reading as a right, but today people are already talking, and in Finland is really legal right, meaning if something is legal right, where infrastructure needs to build, this is something where need of investment is essential, and it is very good that there are many mechanisms which can support this to come true. I would say that water, air and freedom is something what is completely normal for everybody of us, but this infrastructure is not easy. It's extremely comprehensive. We are talking in all these countries, what I am very happy, not only with operators, but also with the governmental offices, with communities. This is also showing that they are starting to think about how to make a digitalization overall. Of course, operators did a lot, they invested a lot so far, but we cannot expect from them, as already mentioned, that they will do all, because to ensure human right, like internet access is, then definitely all stakeholders should do a lot. Nokia can contribute from the technology point of view. And yes, we are talking in all countries how to use maximum existing technologies. There are plenty of solutions, what you can implement on a copper, what you can implement on a fiber, what you can implement wireless, which is definitely future. And this is important to have this path to come to the wished solution, wished status. But important is that actually this is not enough, because you cannot come to the 5G, you cannot have a network ready for digital economy without really intensive changes in the network. Coming back to the key, let's say, findings in a countries, I would summarize, not to talk too long, in 4. One is definitely that economies needs injection of investment. This is extremely important, as already said, to have it as a globally solved as economy in going to digital world, digital age. Second part is then regulation as well. I mean, we as a vendor of equipment are listening different stakeholders on the market. They are having difficulties and they need a long time to put certain base station or a cable to be used actually, meaning put down barriers definitely will help to everybody. Additionally as well is important is that connectivity is on the right level, affordable as already said, because this will then make simply more competition and for end users, for end user benefits. Important as well is we are talking about digital economies. I mean digital economy led only will telco sector will not come to the right end. Telco plus ICT is the right hands being together and go steps forward, because knowledge what telco has, knowledge what ICT has, only can achieve this wished goal. And at the end, what is important, this is innovation. I mean, we as a Nokia, I prepare some slides at the end, you will see. Definitely innovation is bringing us further. I mean, to be on a market because of tariffs model definitely will not bring us in the future. I mean, important is to have services which will bring really value add for end customers. And I see that being on a market that operators and communities are really thinking about this. How to make easier parking for citizens, how to make air control, meaning in case of problem with air that certain actions can be done. All this is coming towards 5G as well, but it is important to be think now and to be handled now. And here is the role of Nokia, and we are really happy to help. We established 5G Academy, for example, and we are going around the countries and trying to vendor agnostic completely, but try to make all stakeholders aware about, because if they are aware, then they will contribute to the community and contribute to the development of society.
Thank you, Nives. Thank you. Goran, we had a very interesting discussion a little bit off yesterday on how the broadband development went in the region until now. So can you please give your side also as a president of the Southeastern Europe Broadband Council, but also as a businessman who has developed different companies in the region?
Thank you very much. As a president of Southeast Europe Broadband Council and also as a representative of MASIT, the only ICT chamber of commerce in the region. Actually, yeah, we were talking about some subjects last night, but from the strategy perspective point, all those countries in the region, talking about here, they have already some strategies and working on some strategies. As we know, probably Serbia and I think Kosovo already have broadband plans. Macedonia is working on it. But unfortunately, what we are missing in the last 10 to 15 years, it's a long-term strategy on broadband side. And this is what we are seeing with years and years. So we need a strategy which will not going to be changed by the next government or forgotten by the next government. This is the first what we need, and I'm talking pure from a business side, because we are not clear how we will be supported by the institutions and how we will be supported by the environment if we start investing in development of networks. This is one thing. On the other side, I think that the government sometimes is trading with the wrong things in this broadband development and digital transformation and all this ICT world. The government never think about consolidation of the markets. Consolidation of the markets is nothing new. It's something which is happening in the world, and it's bringing broadband development on a very high stage. And this is what should happen. But then we will have a question: what will happen with the competitiveness on the markets? What will happen if the market be so consolidated? There are models who will ensure that there will not be any competitiveness issue and problem, because I'm not talking about consolidation with the big ones. I'm talking with the real consolidation, regional ones, clusterization, acquisition and mergers between the operators and companies, because it's shown in the last 10 years, especially in this region. I was working in those, let's say, projects, and not only in this region, also in the Western Europe and also in the United States, that the consolidation actually is bringing more development. This consolidation shouldn't go in, the government should start provoking this kind of consolidation, but not in a direction that the big ones will survive and the small ones will die. The competitiveness should be there. But on the other side, when we are talking for the big ones, we are expecting, I think that the government is expecting that the big ones should pay for everything. If they need more money in the budget, let's put some additional tax to the telcos. And this happens with years and years in the past. So, you know, if they want to make some new movie or to give some fund for movies, let's put more taxes on the telcos. So this will not gonna drive us to development. So we should start training with the right things. The big ones will never stop acting in their benefit. I'm talking especially in the region, because now we are 6 countries here, and all of the big players are negotiating separately. And this is great for them, because everybody will negotiate separately. They will keep the roaming on a very high price level, and this will go with years and years, because it's in a favor of them. But then the government should trade something. The government should give them something, and also not how to say, the individual governments. We should start thinking as a region, because this is the only way. And this is the only way. It will not happen on another way. We will go to European Union all together. We're not going to go separately. And when we'll start thinking together, then the big ones will have some interest, like lower OPEX and this kind of situations, which they will have what to trade with the market and with everything.
Thank you. I think I can note something very important on what you are saying, which is the economy of scale for this topic at the level of the region. Of course, we are not yet here. We are doing some steps towards there, but we are not yet at the point where we are thinking regional. But of course, for these big networks, big scale networks, we have to think regional. And I think there is a real topic for the regional institution like the RCC to tackle that at the regional scale and to go forward at this point. As the panel is very big and we will not have too much time to have a second full round, I would like to ask to the participants if they have any questions before going to some kind of conclusions. So, do someone like to ask some questions? I know that we have a very good level of participants from governments, from the private sector, from the regulators. So, someone want to break the ice? Okay, we'll continue to talk between us. But let's go a little bit more to the point now. Some questions were already tackled. I would like to go a little bit to 2 points: the question of roaming in the region and the question of 5G. So first of all, for Mr. Ringrose on the, from the European Commission on the question of roaming. We have, to make it clear for everybody, we have two topics there. We have the roaming between the Western Balkan 6 countries, which was a political will of the region to go in a roaming-free situation. And then we have the question of roaming between the Western Balkan 6 and the European Union countries. So can you give your insight on that, please?
Yesterday, I think the minister from Bosnia was talking about bridges and building bridges and so on. And I think there's a few very important points were made by Natalia and by Goran beforehand. Natalia saying that, of course, telecoms here, nothing will happen without the private sector. The private sector are the ones who have to make the changes, they're the ones who have to make the investments and so on. So the role of the public sector here, to a large extent, is about facilitating that process in terms of the reforms and in terms of the framework and so on. So that's what we are trying to do in the Commission in terms of the roaming exercise. We're trying to, we have said at the beginning, now the Commission has given an accession perspective to the region, which was lacking before. This week we recommended to open negotiations with 2 other countries in the region. So now the situation has changed, and what we're saying to the telcos is, look, the situation is changing. Your business models are going to have to take account of that. If countries join the European Union, they'll have to adopt the acquis. How can we help have a smoother process that will bring roaming charges down? Like that. So this is what we're trying to do. But I think, as Goran said, the regional aspect is important. We have both an accession process and we have the commitment to regional economic integration in Trieste in the last year. And as you said, we have 2 processes and things need to proceed on both of them. And the Commissioner was clear yesterday that for us, the completion of the regional roaming agreement is a precondition for moving further, we think, on lowering roaming charges with the European Union, because it will be difficult to explain that we'd rather move ahead with 4 countries than with everybody in the region. We have to move together, and I think, and I'm very happy to see that Albania and the government of Kosovo have submitted letters about acceding to the regional roaming agreement, and I think this is a very good step. As far as roaming between the region and the European Union is concerned, we're not going to regulate. This is not like a 10-year process that we began with Roam Like at Home. We're discussing with the companies about what sort of commercial voluntary agreements they can put in place. We welcome the willingness of all of the operators to come and to talk to us about this and to let us know what it is that they plan, what they can do. And there, I think what's also important is the regional aspect. We're not looking at moving ahead with, just 1 or 2 operator can make some changes and that will be fine. I think we need something more consistent than that. And if the Commissioner is going to announce a roadmap in Sofia, a roadmap implies a direction, it implies milestones, and it implies a process. And I think that's what we're working on. I think the companies that we're talking to have realized that this is important. They've realized the direction that the market is moving. They stress to us, of course, the importance of regulatory reform. They tell us repeatedly how much they're spending on spectrum, how much they're spending on licensing, how much they're spending on right-of-way, how much they're spending on access fees and so on. This is obviously something that we're aware of, and this was the discussion that we had on roaming within the European Union. But we're very clear that it's not acceptable to see the kind of sky-high levels of roaming fees that you can see with some operators, and that we need to see a solution to this, because otherwise the consumers in the region will not have the benefits of cheaper roaming tariffs. And we're continuing to discuss with the operators, and we're sure that we can come up with something that will, or that they can come up with something that will benefit the consumers of the region, while ensuring that they can continue to invest in the networks that we all agreed need to be put in place.
Okay, I see that Natalia wanted to intervene a little. Please keep it short, because I want to have also the point of view of Albania, which is joining the agreement, the regional agreement, I think, and you wanted also, Mr. Gungal, yes?
Yeah, but it's not entirely roaming. I think it's more about the regional aspects. You know, we are digital summit here between the Western Balkans. I think that those ties, digital ties between the countries is very important for roaming, for 5G, for all that. Future of this is mostly, you know, fixed somehow. The digital ties, interconnectivity between the countries is the one issue that can be discussed here. We are now pretty much sort of closed in each of our yards, sorting out national connectivity issues, but what can be done between those countries of yours, like make your utilities cooperate with each other under these digital highway initiatives that we have. This will bring a lot of visibility to the region, making you be able to position yourself as a region with a strong, reliable, well-wired infrastructure, you know, then complementing it with some other thing. I think that's something very important. There is potential for a lot of regional collaboration among the countries, and I think those should be very much prioritized here in the summits like this in particular. Thank you.
Okay. This is passionating everybody, so Dorina, please, some words and then...
I fully agree with Natalia. Actually, we need to think to regionally connect in all aspects, but this is one of the activities and we will go step by step, I think. Our Deputy Prime Minister has officially stated yesterday that we are ready to join the present agreement of roaming at the present tariffs. So we have completed our internal, how to say, due diligence, and we are ready. The regulator has had different consultations with the providers, and apparently our tariffs are there or maybe lower than the agreement tariffs. So I understand that there is a new agreement being drafted, but we prefer to be in the roaming agreement today and then join the new agreement a month after, when it's ready. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So please, Mr. Gungal.
Yeah, on roaming, I just wanted to say that we have received this an invitation by the EU Commission to contribute to this process. We have a lot of expertise on work on roaming, and we have seen that the roaming data traffic with Roam Like at Home increased by roughly 400%. And within the European Union, it's a huge success for citizens. And if we could achieve a roaming agreement with the region, I think this would bring the region much, much closer to the digital single market. And we in BEREC will start a process with the national regulators of this region. In June in Poland, we will set up a meeting and discuss how we can support this process. Number one will most likely be a collection of data where we look at the wholesale rates, look at the retail rates, and see what is feasible. And I totally agree that it should be a smooth transition towards Roam Like at Home. This will help, on the one hand side, the operators to, because this is a huge loss in revenues and margin, of course. And on the other hand side, because there is no free lunch, operators will in return ask what they get for it. And here BEREC comes into play in a sense that in particular, we have to secure independence of regulators. Independence of regulators means trust of the industry, and trust means investment. And it was mentioned earlier that, and this is not an issue of the region, but somewhere else in the world and in Europe as well, we have to take care that auction procedures are designed in a way that do not take away too much money from the operators that they would need for investment. So a reasonable approach on auction awards, a reasonable approach on infrastructure cost, bringing down the cost of rolling out infrastructure, this will be very important. And in order to get a roaming agreement from the operators, I think we have to do a lot of work in the area of cost reduction in broadband rollout and auction awards.
Yes, Mr. Mugado, you...
Just very quickly, a few bullet points. First of all, private sector. Of course, the priority should be the involvement of the private sector. But let's face reality. Private sector alone, particularly in white zones, will not work. So there is the need of course, exploring as much as possible the participation of the private sector on the perspective of a bankability of the projects, but some complementary funding, if not full funding, depending on each case, from grants and from the public sector will be unavoidable. Second point, I absolutely agree with the regional perspective. We cannot stay within national boundaries. Even under a perspective of economies of scale and of optimization of the networks, it is absolutely fundamental to adopt a regional perspective, very much in the context of, by the way, other policy initiatives to create the regional economic area. Third, also in the context of affordability of the investments and of cost savings, infrastructure sharing is also very, very important. For example, we are right now supporting a big project in Italy, which consists of using the infrastructure of the electricity main company as a base precisely to deploy optical fiber broadband. So using existing infrastructure, being it electricity, being it water, being it railways, being it motorways, in order to save as much as possible very heavy structural costs. The fourth point is we are talking here of standalone digital projects, but let's not forget also IT components in projects in other sectors. You have projects in manufacturing, you have projects in schools, in hospitals, and so on. There is also the need of supporting the IT components of those investments. For example, we have now a very important and flagship project which we are looking into very seriously in Serbia, which consists of the digitalization of schools, internet in schools. And this is also very important under another perspective, which is the digital culture, in order to avoid digital divide. Because digitalization is very nice, but we need to make it as wide and as spread as possible amongst different sectors of the population, starting with youngsters.
Perfect conclusions, I think, but and even a perfect transition to the next panel, which will speak about your last point, which is the technology in all the sectors. But before that, I would like two short points, please, if you can. 5G in Serbia, you are one of the, as far as I know, the only country in the region which has liberated already the digital dividend 2. So please, some words on that, and then on Nokia will say something.
We have really free spectrum from, we also had it for 800 megahertz for 700 digital dividend 1 and digital dividend 2 in the same time as we finished our digitalization. In fact, we are preparing the digitalization of broadcasting as one of the latest countries in Europe, so we wanted to get the best from that, and we wanted to maximize the digital dividend, not for money only, but also for different purposes in future. For 5G, for instance, we didn't know that it would be for 5G. It was prepared for 4G. Now we have 4G in 800 megahertz, and we have in different parts of bandwidth, band also. But now we are prepared completely for 5G, and we believe that we say that the golden part of spectrum at the moment, just at the moment, is 3.4, 3.8, because everyone, in fact, Nokia as well, we are working with Nokia something, they are preparing themselves for 3.4. Unfortunately, in 700 megahertz band, in digital dividend 2, all countries surrounding Serbia are not prepared for that. We finished that in 2015, and we have to wait for that until 2021, I believe. And this is something that we will do and we have to do. But in the meantime, as we are adopting the new law on electronic communications, we will offer that part of spectrum for experiments, and we know that manufacturers are very much interested in 700 megahertz band, because this is one of the parts that will be used also for 5G. At the moment, there is no equipment in that band as well. So it will be very good for huge coverage, and not only for the industry, but I believe for huge coverage and probably for rural areas. So we are trying to do our best, and we believe that we will succeed in that. We know that it will be really expensive, but we will try to do something for our operators not to be so expensive.
So you are leading the region on at this point, and I will leave the last words to Nives for some points you wanted to highlight.
Yes, thank you very much. I will try to be very short. It is very good to hear, and I know that we are in Serbia working on 5G as well, and that we are somehow having developed steps already. But when we are talking about 5G, I need to say I'm very excited. I can talk hours and hours about 5G. Important is what was already said from colleague from banks, that 5G is not only telco, what I already said. ICT sector is extremely important. 5G is actually about factories. 5G is about traffic. 5G is about schools, universities, about really daily job. And you have several verticals which definitely will have a benefit out of 5G. Countries should be prepared for 5G. And of course, spectrum allocation as a scarce resource is extremely important. 5G is not only access, what everybody is thinking it is access. It is not only access. I mean, to have end-to-end network should be built. Therefore, should gradually go from today to 5G. And also very important, I mean, if we have a 5G and we do not have somebody who will use 5G, meaning ICT and ecosystem developed, this will also not work, because then those who will invest definitely will not invest in the right direction. And I would close with these words that 5G definitely is future. Nokia is helping in a region, and in all our countries we need to work hard, step by step, to come there. And this will definitely help our daily life and job.
Okay. No, we can continue outside. I think we have to leave the place. It was very, very interesting. Thank you all for your engagement and your very interesting insights on this very large topics we will have to deal in the next years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear panelists, dear guests, dear participants. I think that you heard very interesting exchanging of opinion. Now I would like to invite you in the next hall, Hall 3, on a coffee break. We'll come back in a half an hour.